In verse 2, listen to this. So he sends two, and here's what he says to them. Go to the village ahead of you, and just as you enter it, you will find a coat tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, why are you doing this? Say, the Lord needs it and will send it back here shortly. Let me read it one more time. So he sends two, and he says to them, go to the village ahead of you, and just as you enter it, you will find a coat tied there which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you why you are doing this, say, the Lord needs it and will send it back here shortly. Here it is in just a few lines of scripture. Jesus gives the two some very detailed instructions. They are detailed to the core. And then I thought about it. That's probably why you can only send two. Because if you send too many, it's going to get twisted before you can get up the street. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Especially if you got too many of us's, they'll swear Jesus didn't say what he said. But he gives specific, detailed instructions to these two. And I want you to write this down because, see, there is a saying that says, don't sweat the small stuff. Well, if you're getting close to your overflow, you need to sweat the small stuff. Because sometimes what prevents us from getting to the places we desire is that we don't give attention to the details. And sometimes it's the details that will help catapult us to where we are going at a faster rate. But I believe just like these two disciples, you know, I was wondering as I tried to put myself in the scripture and to see how it might have happened. I bet they were sitting there looking like this. Wait a minute. I just imagine. Now, it doesn't say in the text, so I'm just using my own spiritual thought. Wait a minute, Jesus, say that one more time. So a coat, oh, wait a minute, a coat now. Oh, no, an unridden coat. Okay, wait a minute, let me make sure I got that. Write that down. Because, see, sometimes if you're going to get to your overflow, you have to listen as if your life was on the line. You've got to listen as if you're, and let me just tell you, I'm talking about listening to the voice of the divine. And I'm not one of those hyper spiritual pastors that will say, I heard his voice coming out of the wind and it sounded like this. I've never had that kind of encounter with God. Some people have. I'm not that deep. I can't tell you if God's voice is a tenor. I can't tell you none of that. But what I do know is because of relationship. I know when he speaks to my heart. Anybody know what I'm talking? When there is a spiritual encounter and the Lord ministers to my, I can't tell you what it sounds like audibly, but when you walk close enough with God, God will talk to you for yourself, but you have to listen as if your life were on the line. Stop sending all your money to prophet so-and-so on TV, telling you something generic you already knew. Now, I believe in the gift of prophecy, but I believe in God's true and anointed prophets. You're not going to convince me to send you $365 and you told me God going to bless you. It was a blessing to get up. It was a blessing to be able to wave your hand. That's why we got caught up when we were singing, He woke me up this morning and started me on my, that's why we got, because that's just a blessing to get up. Don't send your money off to something. You better talk to God for yourself. I try to tell you, don't be engaged in pulpit worship. You have access to God for yourself. In fact, tell your neighbor you can talk to him for yourself. Tell one more person they don't believe it. Tell you can talk. You better not be waiting on me to get there because I might have to stop at the gas station. Somebody better say something in here. Because see, when you listen as if your life were at stake, It's consecrated listening. You have taken time. See, here's one of the problems. Some of us don't ever prepare ourselves to engage in divine dialogue. You got to consecrate yourself. Stop waiting on Pastor Wynn to lead you in praise and worship. Stop waiting on Brother Jesse. When you know God for yourself, your praise and worship should have started in the car. See, some of us, we came from homes where there were house worship. Somebody knows what I'm talking about. When grandmama and big mama and them be ironing on the ironing board. Wow. So the kitchen would be transformed into a sanctuary. Sometimes you have to pull over to the side of the road because a thought comes in your mind. Because I don't care what you say, if you can praise and worship God anywhere. That's why you have to be careful. You get caught up at work and don't knock your stuff off your desk now. But when God been good to you, is that anybody's testimony? Sometimes you get caught up, even at the Kroger's or the Publix, because you have a record of when you didn't have what you have to eat now. But God always made a way. Oh, see, that's kind of talking to get me going right there. Because all you have to do is look back, and you don't have to look back too far. The fact that he brought you over hills and mountains, the fact that he brought you through the dangerous highway, something ought to well up on the inside, and you forget about your credentials, you forget about your training, but your mouth flies open and you tell the Lord thank you, because you didn't have to do what you did. When you listen as if your life was on the line, you learn how to delete distractions. Sometimes you have to get away from Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Sometimes you have to get away from the text messaging and the television and the cell phones. But then the other times, the distractions you have to get away from are from critical talkers. Because if you listen to the wrong people, you'll find yourself discouraged. That's why sometimes you've got to remove yourself from people who find a sick satisfaction in critical talking. And in those cases, if you can't find anyone to be an encouragement to you, you have to incorporate the David theology, where you learn how to encourage your own self. See, then also, brothers and sisters, if you're going to listen as if your life, what they say, I've sort of grasped this here recently, you've got to get some good rest. Some of us cannot hear from the divine because we are not rested. And when you're not rested, let me tell you what happens when you're not rested. You'll think God is speaking and God ain't said nothing. Or you'll make God say things that God didn't say. But I've learned, President Harris, that God can even minister to you even in your sleep. Anybody see when he ministers in your sleep, you know it's God and not the fact that you ate a chili dog the night before. You're able to discern spiritual conversation. But then also when you listen as if your life was at stake, you realize that you may have to go extreme. And here's the extreme word. It's called fasting. Some of us don't like to hear that word because it means you got to turn your plate down. You got to not go get the Popeyes chicken this week. But let me tell you something. Here's why fasting is so important. If you've been like me, sometimes you can't hear from God clearly when you ate all the chicken and dressing, all the cornbread, 2 pieces of cake, 3 cups of cobbler. Y'all laughing, but y'all know I'm talking right. Because see, some of us have tried to talk to God on a full stomach, and not only did we fall asleep, we forgot that we were talking to God. Jesus says that there's some things that are so critical that prayer must be married to fasting. And let me just say this, I don't mind saying it. Some of this foolishness we got going on in this nation, it requires prayer and fasting. Because when you pray and you fast, you'll get some directives so that you can act for the good of all humanity. And some of us, we need to move quickly because the generations are at stake. Stop listening to folks who sound good, but it doesn't make any sense. We need to get busy because the time, our foreparents said, is getting late in the evening. And the sun is going down. So, saints of God, you've got to listen critically. I'm a lover of law and order. How many love law and order? I don't like new law and order. I like old law and order. Where the TV's kind of grainy still. But here's what I like about old law and order. They had jury trials. And you would look at law and order, and the people on the jury would be sitting on the edge of their seats trying to get all the details because somebody's life was literally at stake. Well, see, I think that's how we ought to listen to God. We need to get on the edge of our spiritual seats. And we need to be listening critically, because when God speaks, we need to hear God clearly so that we can apply what he is telling us, so that we can move, because for some of us, our lives are at stake. And for some, even deeper, the lives of others are connected to what we do or don't do. Don't just think it's about you. Somebody's turnaround is connected to your turnaround. Somebody's deliverance is connected to your deliverance. Some child's graduation is connected to your moving. Brothers and sisters, it's not just about you.